What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by comic creator Karla Nappi. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. It's so funny because we're in a group chat together on like Instagram.
Yep.
And I saw you had a book come out, and my, Lost in Comics, my friends, they had a variant cover. I was like, oh, that's cool. I gotta check it out. And then like a couple weeks ago, you're like, oh, my friend HS Tack has a book. You gotta check it out. I'm like, I just interviewed him. Like, and then like just the other day, you're like, oh, my friend Rylan Grant. I'm like, Rylan Grant's been on the show more than I have. I'm like, why are we not talking yet? Like, we should be best friends.
Well, and now you got to have my friend Stephen Prince on next then, because he does Monster
He's been
Matador.
on twice.
Oh, he's been on twice. Awesome.
Monster Matador. He was just on a couple weeks ago.
Oh, fabulous.
So it's like it was destined to be like you had to be a part of the show. But I'm excited. You have a book that's out right now with Second Sight Publishing called Duplicant, and we're gonna jump into that and talk about that real quick. But before we do, I want to just know, how did you get into reading comics, or just get into the hobby of comics?
It came to me much later in life. I was already probably into my 30s by the time I got into comics. And I had a friend who convinced me to go to conventions. I'd always been like, oh, they're so crowded. And I finally went because she was speaking on a panel. And I was like, I am an idiot. I should have been doing this my whole life. I was like, these are my people. This is the best thing ever. Seeing people in costumes and everything. And then I started meeting comic book people. So Himcar had Boy One out at the time when I got into comics. And then my friend Mark Miller, who used to work with Clive Barker, he had a book out at the time through Clive Barker's imprint. And, it started to have all these people that I knew were getting into comics. And so that's kind of what delved me into it.
It's so cool. It's so funny like that, how it seems like the comic community is so just tight knit, and it's like, oh, this one, this one, like it's so cool. And I love it. So how did that transition of kind of getting exposed into comics then translate to like, I want to do this, I want to write a comic?
I was working on Duplicant as a pilot script, and I had finished it, and my agent was trying to get me out for meetings for staffing, and we were having trouble kind of getting a foothold in there. And I don't remember if I had heard of someone who had adapted their book into their script into a comic book or what, but there was something in the ether that was like, well, maybe this might be a good idea. And I was like, well, I have literally no idea how to write comic books at all. I was like, put me a TV script or like a feature film. I know those backwards and forwards, because as a script coordinator, that was my job, was to proof and format those scripts. So do that in my sleep. But comics, I was like, and I couldn't really find anything online about comic scripts. It seemed like there was no set format, which coming from film and TV kind of blew my mind. I was like, what? There's no set format. So I was like, all right, I said, I need to go back to school. Basically, I was like, I need to find a class. And I found one class that was online, but I'm not a very good online learner. And so I kept digging, and I found this class at Meltdown Comics in West Hollywood, which is where I met Ryland and where I met Steve. So we all took, Ryland and I took this comic book class together, the first one, which was supposed to be just like a standalone issue, how to write a comic book, but we're just going to do a standalone issue. And of course, Ryland and I were like, well, maybe we should do this as a series instead. Because I went in and I was like, well, I'm just going to do a one-off series of Pamela, because in my pilot script, Pamela is a one scene person. That's it. Okay. She appears in one scene and then she's gone. And so I realized when I was adapting her into this pilot, into the comic script, which was issue 1, she needed a much bigger arc. She needed to become a much bigger character. And I was like, I really felt like I loved this writing comic books. It was challenging, but in a good way. And it felt like all the stuff I had learned through all my years in film and TV had helped me be able to wrap my head around how to write this.
Yeah.
And so Ryla and I got the teacher to create a class on doing comic book series, like how to do a series proposal. So then that's where Steve came in and took this class. And so, yeah, it was just from there, it was history. That's where Duplicant was developed. And that's where Banjax and Aberrant were developed.
So cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny because literally the first person I ever, when I started doing YouTube back in, March last year when COVID hit as kind of an escape, Rylan was the first one on my channel. And so I got very familiar with Ban Jackson Aberrant. And very quickly then I found about Steven and with Monster Matador. And it's just, it's so cool to hear kind of the origin story of like, going through this with other creators and other writers. And that's just so neat. I had a couple weeks ago on the show, Clay Adams.
Oh yeah, Clay is the one who builds all my Kickstarter pages.
Well, he talks about how tried out a class at like NYU and did the same type of thing, and it's just such a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Duplicant then. This is your, this is your first foray into comics, correct? Duplicant?
Yes.
Okay. So if someone hasn't gotten to read issue 1 yet, you definitely still can hop in on board. Issue 2 is coming out hopefully this week, with everything like that. But what is Duplicant about?
Okay, so Duplicant is, first I should say Duplicant was written before our current pandemic, but it's set in the future during a pandemic of organ failure. And it focuses on the scientist Matt Travers, who creates duplicate organs. So instead of getting a human organ when, say, like your lung or your heart fails, you get a perfect copy of your organ that's printed for you. But the cost is so high, you're sold into indentured servitude. So you might end up doing work you never wanted to do in your life. And that's what happens to our lead character, Pamela. And when she starts to hear that there might be some fatal flaw with the tech, like the rumor mill is churning, then she decides to seek out Matt Travers to see if he can help her. And that starts him on a journey to find out if something has been done with his tech, because he only wanted it to do good. So he's been as frustrated as everyone else that it's been monetized in this way.
That's so cool. That's awesome. Yeah. And I got to read issue 1. And it's, if you're reading issue 1, you're captivated. You're like, I want to dig into this world so much and see, because you leave issue 1 on a cliffhanger, and I'm not going to spoil anything for people, but you're like, and the universe that you just have created, I think it's something that people, it seems like science fiction, but it almost seems like it could be a really soon reality.
Yeah, much sooner than I think, at the time when I created it in like 2015, than I realized it would be.
So where did this idea concept kind of come about for your story?
So I originally, I think there's like a letter in the back of issue 1 where I kind of like talk about how it went through a bunch of different iterations, which is unique to what's in stores as opposed to what I do on my Kickstarter, the letter part. But I had seen Repo, the genetic opera, at this little theater in New York when it came out. And I was like, that's a great idea. That would, like, how would you do that as a TV show? That would be super cool. And then, Minority Report and Blade Runner I love those movies. I own both, and I've seen them probably so many times I can quote them back to everyone. And then at the time, it just happened when I was doing the research for ideas that there was all these articles on like BBC and stuff about 3D printing of organs, like what was going on with those fields and with nanotechnology as a medical device. And so it just seemed like a perfect storm of things that were happening at the time. And then also just like coming off of my own experiences with medical issues and not having insurance and debt and that type of stuff, like having to make decisions about whether you are going to take care of yourself or not because you can't afford it.
Yeah.
And the other thing, when I was actually writing the comic book part that came up as an influence for me was having grown up during the AIDS epidemic and how people were treated then as though, they were toxic when they were the absolute opposite of that. So that was a big influence. So people, I think when they're reading it now, they're like, oh, she was influenced by what's happening today. But it was actually the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see like how, real life and how like things that have impacted our lives and stuff, how it translates into the stories that you as a creator are telling. And I think it's a story that people like can resonate with. Dealing with, health insurance and dealing with like, do I go to the dentist even get this crown done because it's going to cost me this much money, and it's like, is it worth it? And do you kind of pick and choose? And then this idea in your story of the indentured servitude, and it just is, it's like it says, like it's science fiction with like the idea that like it's dosed heavily, it seems like, in our reality.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely heavily influenced by a lot of stuff I think people can relate, unfortunately,
Yeah.
can relate to.
Yeah. So you said this started as a Kickstarter. Um,
Yeah, so I had done the first issue I did in the comic book writing class as far as the script, and then I paid to have it drawn, and then there was a gap because I got a publisher right away, and unfortunately that didn't work out. So once I got the book back from the publisher, then I did issue 2. And then at that point, I was like, well, what do I do with this now? Because I was having trouble finding a publisher at that point. But also, I was like, I can't afford to keep taking out loans
right.
to do this book. I had paid for issue 1 because I had 2 jobs at the time. And then issue 2 was a loan. And then I had my son, and I was like, I can't. That can't just keep taking out loans. So that's when I did the Kickstarter. And of course, the Kickstarter was January of 2020. It ended in February of 2020. And it was like, and then we were in a real pandemic, and I had a book about a pandemic.
So you were the cause of the pandemic.
I was the cause of the pandemic, exactly.
You spoke it into existence. Thanks, Karla.
Exactly. I know. I manifested it. Well, it's definitely been creepy seeing how like close to reality I got some of the stuff where I was like,
Like, well, it's funny, talking with Jonathan Hedrick one point, he did the book The Recount, and
right.
like it
Oh,
came
and then
out
yeah.
during the political uprising. I'm like, this is crazy how these like are combining for you guys as creators, and so how did you go from this process of taking it from Kickstarter to now bringing it to Second Sight and getting connected with them and putting it through Diamond and stuff like that? What was that process like?
So the Kickstarter for the first one was for issue 1 and 2. And that was basically just to fund printing of the book and getting it into people's hands. But I raised enough over it to fund art on issue 3. So then, I did a Kickstarter for issue 3. I did a Kickstarter for issue 4. And in between then, I had seen an article that Second Sight was looking for content, specifically science fiction content. And I was like, all right, let me just send them an email. So, send. And then it was like, ring. And it was Spike, who's the editor in chief. He called me within like 15 minutes and was like, we want to buy your book, which was wild. And then I was like talking to Marcus and I was talking to Bradley. I was talking to all the heads of the company on the same day. And I think we had the contract signed within like a month. So at the time, they were just going to be doing distribution themselves. They weren't in Diamond yet. So we actually were like just starting the process of trying to do direct sales. I want to say in like October or something of last year. But then all of a sudden they found out they got into Diamond, and it was like, full stop. Now we're pushing everything off so we can be officially in Diamond.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so issue 1 came out last month?
April. Yeah.
Okay. And what was that like? What was that experience for you? Like just being able to hold your comic book that people can buy through a store in your hands?
It was wild. So I live in a pretty like small town here. So I keep joking that hopefully this won't offend anyone who lives here, but I keep joking that I'm like the most interesting person in the area because I keep ending up on the local news here. So like I had done this thing where I was trying to get this crosswalk fixed in the area, and I ended up like on the news twice for that. And then when I was like, maybe they'll be interested in this comic book thing, like how many people in this town do comic books? And so I ended up with like a newspaper article and like 2 news reports, and one was before the book came out and one was at Jaff Comics in Bethlehem. They came to interview me on the day that it hit stores. Nice. And that was really cool because the store was like hopping. It was super, super busy. You wouldn't expect it because it's on this like road in Bethlehem. It's not in the main town where everything is. And it was like crazy busy. And so people were listening to what I was saying as I was being interviewed. And then all of a sudden I had people like grabbing the book off the shelf and coming up to me to sign the book, which I'd never had before. And I was like, this is really cool.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. And my husband took the day off of work to watch our son, and my friend Stacy drove out, and we drove up to Scranton to where it was at Scranton, and we drove out to Philadelphia to the one comic book store I was at there. So I found it in 3 stores around me, and it was literally the entire day to drive to each one. So it was awesome. And I left postcards at each one from my, like the stretch goals from my Kickstarters. So whoever bought the book got like this little extra bonus.
Nice. That's cool. That's a nice little treat then for people
Yeah.
that go support you. So is this the same? Do you have the same team that was involved with the Kickstarter that's on the process with the book now moving forward? It was have pieces moved or?
The only piece that moved was two pieces that moved. So Vince Hernandez was the editor on the first book, but because there was a big gap between issue 1 and 2, he ended up just being too busy to continue on with the book after that as an editor. And then Josh Reed was my lettering guy on issue 1, and he also created the logo. And he got hired at DC while he was lettering my book, and they're like, you don't do outside projects. So he helped me get Carlos, who has done the lettering since then.
Okay. So same art, same colorist, like, so people can pick that up. So let's talk more about Duplicant. This world you created. You talked about how, we've mentioned how it seems kind of non-science fiction-y, kind of from the aspect of our real world. But
right.
do you have a script written out of like how far you are taking this story? Is this kind of a, you see it as a mini series, or do you see it like this could be ongoing? Like how far do you vision out this series?
Well, important point is, for some reason, Diamond keeps saying this is only 3 issues for the first arc. It's not. It's 1 of 5 for the first arc. So I actually just finished the script for issue 5 about 2 weeks ago. Okay. And that's going to be the biggest issue of the 5. It's probably going to be over 30 pages by the time we're done editing it and everything, which is massive. So poor Mariana is going to be like, her hand's going to be numb by the end of it. But yeah, so we're doing that. And then I thought originally when I broke it in the class with Jim Higgins at Meltdown, it was going to be 15 issues, but that was before I realized you have to pay to make your own books. I naively thought comic books worked like a regular publisher for regular books, and they give you like money to do this. And then I found out the hard way that they don't when I approached publishers at conventions, and they're like, what are you talking about? So I was thinking it was going to be 10 issues, but my publisher definitely seems like they want me to continue past 10. So I got to figure that out if that's something I can and want to do.
Yeah. But definitely you have an expansive universe that you're kind of digging into, and we're going to get to explore here for sure.
Yeah, there'll definitely be one more arc after the first 5. And I want to say there's a break between when 3 and 4 are coming out. So 3 should be out in August, but 4 won't be out until November.
Okay.
And then 5 is out in January.
Okay. So it just is going to be, a slow burn for people to get to enjoy it and soak it in for sure.
And cliffhangers in every issue.
I don't doubt it. After reading issue 1, I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm strapped in. Let's go for this. So. That's so cool. So do you have anything else that you're kind of working on, or is your focus right now on Duplicant and this universe?
Let's see. I have a short comic I did for Clay's Nightmare Theater anthology. Yeah. So that is available now through my Instagram. It's on my link tree. It's actually available for free to download off Gumroad. But if you decide to pay anything, it goes to 2 different charities equally that I have listed in the description. And then Friction, which is a quarterly anthology, they're teaming up with Kelly Sue DeConnick to do what's called the Unseen issue for, I want to say December. And I wrote a comic script that's going to appear in that, which I'm excited about. And then I'm creating a animated series with my friend Sapphire, who's a paranormal expert that's set in the Philippines. Yes. So we're really hoping to sell it. We're working on the pilot script now. We have the pitch already finished, and and my kids' book, but that's kind of on the back burner at the moment. Okay. Because just like
you got a lot that you're juggling right now. And
and I still have to do fulfillment on issue 4. I'm waiting for the printer to send me the final book so I can start packing and shipping.
Yeah. That's so cool. It's funny you mentioned the Nightmare Theater, because I feel like throughout my interviews, people are like, oh, I have a story in Nightmare Theater. I'm so excited for that to come out, because I feel like I backed it back in the fall, and I'm like, it should be coming to my house soon, and I'm excited to read. because it is. It's I don't even remember how I got connected to that and followed that Kickstarter, but it feels like
It was
everyone I
probably
talked to is
Ryland or
involved.
Steven, because
Yeah, probably.
Steven had a story in it.
Okay.
Ryland didn't, but Steven did. I did, and like everyone I know had a story in
Yeah, it seems like
it.
it's all like everyone's so like, oh, you're. I'm like, oh, okay, you're in the.
Oh,
So
and David
it's
Pepos, he had a story in it too. If you've interviewed David,
yep,
I know David.
yep. David's been on the show, so everyone okay. So if you haven't been on my show, you are not involved in this Kickstarter.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Man, I'm excited to just continue to read this series of what you've created. I've got the variant cover right there from my homies Lost in Comics that they did. And that's just so cool too. First comic, you're getting variant covers out. Like people like that has to be encouraging to you that people are excited about this book, it seems.
It seems like people are really excited about it, which is promising, and it definitely helps my anxiety as the person that's like, is everyone gonna hate it?
That's so cool. Well, what's the best way for people if they want to follow like what you're working on, what you're creating? What's the best way for people to stay in contact with you?
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram under Musings by Crazed, and I know my link tree is definitely on Instagram. I don't remember if I have it set up on Twitter. My website is my name, karlanappi.com. And then on Facebook, I have a page for Duplicant, which is facebook.com/duplicant comic.
Nice. And all the links that you just mentioned are in the description of this video below. So if you're watching, make sure you guys go click on those. Support Karla, support Duplicant. I'm telling you what, gang, it's so good. I think you're going to really dig it. And I am excited for people to get more into this world for sure. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on. So thank you so much for just taking some time to talk comics with me.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And we're going to have to do it again because it sounds like you've got so much coming on, and let's be honest, I'm tired of Steven and Rylan on my show. We need you back.
We should have all three of us on a show.
Yes, we'll make it work. We'll do it sometime. Because let's be honest, Rylan's probably dropped 3 Kickstarters since we've started talking this interview.
I don't know how he keeps up with as much as he does. I'm like, I've got a kid too, and he's got a kid, and I'm home with my son all the time. We don't have the money to put him in daycare, so I think that's the big difference.
Oh man. Well, we should do a group chat sometime.
Absolutely, because I actually read. So after we did that class, Steve Ryland and Jeff Leeds, who's another creator you should interview. Steve mainly does anthologies, and we all read each other's stuff. So I've literally read every issue of Banjax, every issue of Aberrant before they've been drawn, every issue of The Jump, The Peacekeeper, his new series, oh my gosh, Suicide Jockeys, literally everything. Same with Monster Matador. Every single issue. So they've read every issue of Duplicant.
That's so good. Yes, that's awesome. And I'm excited to just that you've created such a cool world. And I think people are really, you're hearing it already. I think from people talking about the book, I think more are just going to be excited for Duplicant. So again, thank you so much for just taking some time to talk comics with me. And we will make that happen for sure. And gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.